Good afternoon, guys. You're here with Mr. Sa. Now, today I'm going to be teaching you a little bit about transformation of graphs. Now, without wasting any time, let us dive right in. So, first and foremost, guys, we're going to be learning about how to graph the basic sine graphs, which we have right here. Y is equal to sine of x. All right. Now, we also know from the unit circle that sine is the y coordinate of the unit circle for any given angle. All right, guys. So if we have to write an ordered pair as x and y, this will be our sine value for that particular degree. All right, guys. Now, in this case, if we take this point, right, if we take this point at 0 degrees, we know that sine will have a value of 0. At 90 degrees, sine will have a value of 1. So let me go ahead and highlight it and keep going on counterclockwise. All right, guys. Now, there are a few terms that you'll be using here, which is important, is what we know as the amplitude. So what do we mean by the amplitude? The amplitude will give us the minimum and maximum for our y-axis. Now, an easy way to find the amplitude, we just look at the number that is in front of the sign here. So if there is no number, we immediately know that the value is equal to 1. Therefore, our amplitude is equal to 1. So let us go ahead and plot that right now. So we have a 1 and a -1 as the amplitude is 1. Next, guys, let us go ahead and find our period, right? Find our period. Now, period can be found by taking 2 pi, dividing it by the absolute value of b. Now, the absolute value of b is the term that is in front of x right here. So the front of x, we again have just a normal one. So 2 pi divided by 1 is going to give us 2 pi. All right, guys. So the period is equal to 2 pi in this case. Now, what I'm going to do for all of the questions is I'm going to divide it into 4 equal parts, just because for simplicity and just because that our unit circle is also divided into 4 quadrants. So if I take 2 pi and divide it by 4, I'm going to get, when we simplify, I'm going to get pi over 2. All right, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and divide this into 4 equal parts. So the first one, I'm going to have pi over 2. The second one, I'm going to have 2 pi over 2, which is also equal to pi. The third one is 3 pi over 2. And the last one is 4 pi over 2, which is also equal to 2 pi, which is right here, the period, right, guys? Now, let us go ahead and start graphing. Now, we know that when it is at 0 degrees, sine has a value of 0. So this is our 0 degrees. So sine has a value of 0. So let's put a mark right there. Now the next one is for 90 degrees. So 90 degrees, or we can also write it as pi over 2. Now for 90 degrees or pi over 2, sine has a value of 1. So for pi over 2, sine has a value of 1 right here. So let us go ahead and put an x right there. Now for 180 degrees or pi, so pi can be written as pi or 180 degrees. Now we see that, what do we see? Sine has a value of 0, which I just highlighted. Now let us go ahead and put a cross at 0. Now going towards 270 degrees, so 270 degrees can also be written as 3 pi over 2 or 3 pi by 2. Now for this, we see that the sine value is -1. So for 3 pi by 2, the sine value is -1. So I'm going to put it right here, like guys, right here. And finally, coming back to 360 degrees. So 360 degrees can also be written as 2 pi. Sine has a value of 0, which is going to be right here. All right, guys. Now, if we go ahead and plot the graph, we are going to have a graph that looks something like this. All right, guys. We are going to have a a graph that looks something like this. Now this is also a complete cycle of 360 degrees. Now let us go to the cosine graph. Now let's go to the next one, which is the cosine graph. Cosine graph. So y is equal to cosine graph. Also, let me write y is equal to cosine of x. All right, guys. Now, in the previous question, now sine had the value of the y coordinate. Now, cosine will have the value of the x coordinate. So, let me write that down, x coordinate. All right, guys. Now, what that means is, so for 0 degrees, the cosine will have a value of 1. All right, guys, have a value of 1. Now, similarly, from the previous question, step number 1, we are going to go ahead and find our amplitude. We're going to go ahead and find out amplitude. Now, the amplitude in this case can be easily found by looking at the term in front of cos. Now, in front of cos, we have a 1. Therefore, our minimum and maximum number is going to be 1 and minus 1. All right, guys, since our amplitude is 1. Now, next, we are going to go ahead and find our period. Now, how do we find the period again? We have 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. Now, absolute value of b can be easily found by looking at the term in front of x. Always, guys, in front of x. Now, in this case, when there is no value, we always know that it has a value of 1. So, 2 pi divided by 1 is equal to 2 pi, right, guys? Is equal to 2 pi. Now, the period is equal to 2 pi. Now, I am going to go ahead and divide it into 4 equal parts. Now, again, guys, you guys can divide into 6 equal parts, 8 parts, or whatnot. Now, just because of simplicity, I'm going to divide it into 4 equal parts, but either way, the answer will be the same. All right, guys, the answer would be the same. Now, if I take 2 pi and divide by 4, because I'm dividing it into 4 equal parts, I will have each part as pi over 2 and increasing pi over 2 each time. So this will be pi over 2. This will be 2 pi over 2, which is pi. This will be 3 pi over 2. And this will be 4 pi over 2, which is equal to 2 pi. All right, guys. Now, let us take a look at 0 degrees. Now, this is 0 degrees right here. At 0 degrees, cosine has a value of 1. So, we are going to put an x right here. Now, at 90 degrees, which is also pi over 2, which is pi over 2 radian, we know that our cosine has a value of 0, right? So, let me go ahead and highlight all the x coordinates here. Has a value of 0. So, I'm going to put an x right here. Now, at 180 degrees, or which could be also written as pi, cosine has a value of -1. So, I'm going to put an x right here. At 270 degrees, or 3 pi over 2, cosine has a value of 0, which is going to be right here. And finally, coming back to 360 degrees, or 2 pi, cosine has a value of 1, which is going to go up right here. Now, when we draw the graph, guys, we are going to have a graph that looks something like this. All right, guys. So these are the basic sine and cosine graph. Now, let us look at the next question here, where y is equal to 2 sine of x. 2 sine of x. So in this case, guys, what did I tell you? First, we are going to go ahead and find our amplitude, right? Amplitude. Now, how do we find the amplitude again? The amplitude can be found by easily looking at the term in front of sine here. So the amplitude is equal to 2. Now, what that states, the maximum value is 2 and the minimum value is -2. So let me put it right here. This is 1 and this is 2. This is -1 and this is -2. All right. So we are done with the amplitude part. Next one, we are going to go ahead and find our period. How do we find the period again? We're going to take 2 pi divide by the absolute value of b, right? Now, in this case, b has a value of 1 again by looking at the term in front of x. So we have 2 pi divided by 1, which is again equal to 2 pi, right, guys? Now, dividing it by 4, since I want to divide it into 4 parts. So 2 pi divided by 4 is equal to pi over 2. So what do we have here? We have this one as pi over 2. Pi over 2. This one is equal to 2 pi over 2, which is pi. This one is 3 pi over 2. And the next one is 4 pi over 2, which is equal to 2 pi, right, guys? Which is equal to 2 pi. Now, in this case, guys, let's see what happens in this case. So when when we have 0 degrees, we see that the value of sine is equal to 0, right? Is equal to 0. So let me also write it down. So sine, we are looking at the y coordinate, right? Y coordinate. Y coordinate. Now, when we are at 0 degrees, we see that our sine has a value of 0. But now we are not solving for sine of x, we are solving for 2 sine of x. So what we do, guys, we take 2 and multiply with 0. But in this case, 2 times 0 is still going to give us 2, right? So we are going to plot at 0 degrees. 2 times 0 is going to give us 0, sorry. So we are still going to plot right here at 0. Now for the next one at 90 degrees, we are going to be looking at our y coordinate, right? So 90 degrees, or we can also write it as y over 2. Now since we are talking about 2 sine of x, we are going to take 2 and multiply by 1, and we know that 2 times 1 is equal to 2, right? So therefore for 90 degrees, we would plot it at 2 right here. So 90 degrees, we will plot it at 2 right here. All right, guys. Now going to 180 degrees or pi, 180 degrees or pi. Again, we're going to look at the y coordinate here. Now 2 times 0 is again going to give us 0. So we're going to go down to 0 again. Now 270 degree, guys, what do we have here? So for 270 degrees or 3 pi by 2, 3 pi over 2, we take 2 multiplied by -1 here. Let me do it right here. 2 times -1 is -2. So we are going to plot at 270 degrees at -2, right? 270 degrees will be at -2, right, guys? And finally, coming back to 360 degrees again, we are at 0. So we are going to put it at 0. Now, when we plot the graph for 2 sine of x, we are going to have a graph that looks something like this. All right, guys, something like this. Now, this is when the amplitude is equal to 2. So what that means is it's going to be stretched out. The graph is going to be stretched out. All right, guys. Now let us go to the next question here. So let us write this down. Y is equal to cos pi over 4x. Pi over 4x. Now let us go ahead and find our amplitude, guys. Let's go ahead and find our amplitude. So I'm going to just call it as amplitude is equal to 1 here, as the number in front of cos is 1, right, guys? So our maximum is going to be 1. Our minimum is going to be -1. Now for the period here, let's go ahead and find the period. What do we have for the formula for period, guys? We have 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b, yes? Now in this case, the value of b will be equal to pi over 4. So we can find b by looking at the term in front of x, right, guys? The term in front of x is pi over 4. So we have 2 pi divided by pi over 4. Now, when we divide fraction, we know that we are going to change it into multiplication and find a reciprocal of it. So pi over 4 is going to change to 4 over pi. The numerator goes to the denominator and the denominator goes to the numerator. Now, as you can see here, pi and pi, we can simplify it. So we have a period of 8. We have a period of 8. Now, since I want to divide it into 4 equal parts, now 8 over 4 is equal to 2. So this has a value of 2 and increasing by 2 each time. All right, guys. Now this, we can also say that this is equal to 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, and 360 degrees, right, guys? Now let us go and see what we have here. Let us go and see what we have here. So when we are at 0 degrees, we are looking at cos. So cos means we are looking at the x coordinate. X coordinate is, guys, we're looking at the x coordinate. In this case, when we have cos at 0, we know it is at 1. So let us go ahead and put at 0 degrees, you know, put a cross at 1. All right, guys. When it is at 90 degrees, so 90 degrees, we know that it is equal to 0. So it's going to come down to 0. When it is at 180 degrees, we know it is going to be at negative 1. So 180 degrees is going to be at negative 1. Now 270 degrees, we know it is going to be at 0. So we're going to go back to 0. And coming back to 360, we know that it is going to be at 1. So 360 is going to be at 1 right here. And when we plot the graph, what we have will look something like this. All right, guys, what we have will look something like this. Now, for the next one, here is what we're going to be looking at: phase shift. Okay, guys, now phase shift. Now, if x is grouped with a phase shift of negative, that means it will move towards the positive side. All right, guys, and when it is in grouping with a positive, it'll move towards that negative side. So keep in mind, so let me write this down. So y is equal to sine x minus pi over 2. So since there is a minus in the phase shift here, we know that it will be moving towards the positive side. All right, guys. Now, similarly to the previous question, let us go ahead and find our amplitude. Amplitude is equal to 1, right, guys? It's equal to 1 because the number in front of sine is 1. So let us go ahead and put 1 and negative 1. 1 and negative 1. Next one, we're going to go ahead and find our period. We're going to go ahead and find our period. Now, how do we find our period, guys? We have 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. In this case, again, guys, we are looking, b will be the term in front of x, and the term in front of x is again 1. So 2 pi over 1 is equal to 2 pi. Now, since I'm going to be dividing each into 4 parts, so 4 parts right here, right? 4 parts right here. So 2 pi divided by 4 is going to give me pi over 2, right? Let me plot it right there. So this is pi over 2, this is pi, this is 3 pi over 2, and this is equal to 2 pi or 4 pi over 2, right, guys? Now, in this case, let us first of all go ahead and calculate for 0 degrees. All right, guys. So we know that y is equal to sine of x minus pi over 2. Now, when we are going to calculate for 0 degrees, so we have, what do we have here? Sine is equal, sine 0 minus pi over 2, which is equal to sine of negative pi over 2, right, guys? Now let us take some notes here. We know that pi over 2 is equal to 90 degrees. Therefore, our negative pi over 2 will be equal to negative 90 degrees. Now, don't get scared or anything just because there's a negative 90 degrees. Now, you should have learned this in transformation, that we know that negative 90 degrees is same like 270 degrees, right, guys? Now, if we start from right here, we go 270 degree counterclockwise, we are going to end at the same point as going 90 degree clockwise. Yes, guys? So it is a fair point to say that negative 90 degrees is equal to positive 270 degrees in our case here, right, guys? So let me go ahead and take this off so it's clearer to see. Now what we are going to do is we are going to be looking at our starting point now. So 270 degrees is right here. Now this will tell us our starting point. So when we have sine at 0 degrees for this equation, we are going to be looking at the y-axis, which is equal to -1, right guys? So when we are at 0 degrees, we are going to be plotting at -1. The reason we found this is so that we can know that at 0 degrees, where will be the sign of this question, right? Now after that guys, it's pretty easy. Now I have a technique. The technique is once you have found this value, the next value are just going to be going in counterclockwise. So counterclockwise means we will be looking at this at the next value, which is at 0. Yeah, so for sine we'll be looking at the y coordinate. So sine is equal to the y coordinate, right? Y coordinate. So we'll be looking at 0. So for pi over 2, we will be plotting at 0. Again, go counterclockwise to the next one, which is at 1. So for pi or 180 degrees, we will be plotting at 1 right here. Now going next counterclockwise. Now if you see right here, for 3 pi over 2, we'll be plotting at 0. And coming back to where we started from, where it all began, now at 360 degrees, we are going to be plotting at -1. So it will be right here. All right, guys. So when we draw the graph, it's going to look something like this. It's going to look something like this. All right, guys. Now this is when we are talking about the phase shift. Keep in mind that if this x is grouped with negative, it will go towards the right. If x is grouped with the positive, it will go towards the left. In other words, we can also say that the starting point, so the starting point has moved from 0 to pi over 2. All right guys, to pi over 2. So minus pi over 2 will change to pi over 2. Now let us go ahead and solve one more question. Now in this case guys, we also have the vertical shift of 2. We also have the vertical shift of 2. Now what I want to show you guys is I am also going to copy this graph. I'm going to keep it here, and I want you guys to also kind of see on the similarities between when we have a vertical shift and when we don't have a vertical shift. All right guys, now in this one it's going to be pretty similar to the last one. Step number 1, we're going to go and find the amplitude. The amplitude is equal to 1, looking in front of sine, right? Looking in front of sine here is equal to 1. But since we have a vertical shift of 2, we are going to also add 2 to this. Okay guys, so our amplitude is going to have a value of 3. That means we are going to have 1 here, 2, and we are going to extend it till 3. Similarly, let's go down by 1, so -1, -2, and let me plot it right here, -3. All right guys, so we have found the amplitude. Now the next one we'll be looking at the period. Now the period formula is 2 pi over absolute value of b. In this case, b is the value in front of x, which is also 1. So 2 pi over 1 is equal to 2 pi, right guys, is equal to 2 pi. Now divide this into 4, because I want to divide into 4 equal parts. So 2 pi divided by 4 is going to give us pi over 2 again. So here we are going to have pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, which is pi. This is 3 pi over 2, and 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. All right guys. All right, now let us get to this now. Now since we have a vertical shift of 2 here, what I'm going to do here guys, I'm going to draw an imaginary dotted line at y-axis of 2. Okay, I'm going to draw an imaginary dotted line right here. all right, and y-axis of 2. And I'm going to just keep in mind that this is going to be my origin for the time being. So this is going to be my origin for the time being. All right, guys. Now, after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do similar to what I did in the previous question. So again, so let us find for sine of 0 degrees in here. So what do we have? Substitute x with 0. So we have y is equal to sine of 0 minus pi over 2, right, guys? So what do we have here? We have sine of negative pi over 2, right? So y will be negative pi over 2, and from the previous question we learned that negative 90 degrees is equal to 270 degrees, right, guys? Is equal to 270 degrees. Now from the unit circle we know that this part is equal to our 270 degrees ordered pair. So just keeping this part as our imaginary origin line, we are going to start from 0 degrees. So we know this is our 0 degrees, right, guys? Now if this was our origin, we have to go -1. So we got to go down by 1. Now if we go down by 1, we will plot for this equation for sine right here. All right, guys. And similarly to the previous one, we are just going to go in counterclockwise and going to look at our y-axis. So here it is at 0. So we just imaginary thought that this was our origin, which is 0, 0. So it's going to be right here, right, guys? Then go again to the next one. So here we have a positive one. That means it will for pi or for 180 degrees, we are going to go up by 1. So if this is our, if 2 was our starting point, going up by 1 is going to end at 3, right, guys? Now going counterclockwise to the next one, we have at 0. So 0 is our starting point right here again, right here again. And finally coming back to where we began is equal to -1. In this case, we started at 2, -1. So 2 minus 1 is going to be 1, right, guys? So this is how, oh, sorry, it should be right here for 2 pi. Now this is how we would plot for this equation. All right, this is how we'll plot for this equation. Now if you can see the similarities from the previous one where we did not have any vertical shift to this question where we had a vertical shift. Now in the previous one, at 0 degrees, we started at -1 on the y-axis. But in this one, when we have a vertical shift of 2, for 0 degrees, we started at 1 on the y-axis. So what it means that from -1, we have gone up by 2 units to 1. So all it does is it just changes the vertical shift or the peak value. All right, guys. Now that is how we would solve questions like this. Now I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time, guys. Have a lovely day.